They thought it was just pain from age, something all old ladies go through. A little stiffness, a bruise that lingered too long. But deep down, I knew. The ache in my leg wasn't normal. It was slow, creeping, and oddly familiar, like a shadow that had been waiting for the right moment to show itself. By the time I listened to my body, it was already too late. If only someone had warned me that sometimes the end doesn't knock. It limps in and settles quietly in your bones. My name is Ruth Whitmore, and I'm 84 years old. I used to love walking barefoot through the grass at dawn, the cold dew soaking into my skin. I had strong legs once. They carried me through motherhood, through grief, through long nights on my feet cooking for 5. But now I sit more than I stand. I pause more than I move. And lately, I've been sensing something. A farewell humming through my joints, whispering truths my mind is only now ready to admit. This isn't just a story about pain. It's about a warning I ignored, a sign I mistook for age, and how that mistake became a quiet sentence I now carry every day. If you're listening, I hope it saves you from what I couldn't escape. It began with something so small, I barely noticed. A dull ache behind my right knee, mostly in the evenings. At first, I blamed the cold, then the chair I had sat on for too long, then the shoes I wore to church. You see, when you're my age, people assume pain is just part of the scenery. And I believed them. I had lived through childbirth, buried a husband, survived winters with broken heat and summers with swollen feet. What was one more little discomfort? But still, it lingered. It didn't scream. It didn't demand. It simply settled into me like dust gathering in corners. I remember rubbing my leg one night while watching the news. My granddaughter had just called to tell me about a dance recital. I was smiling, but I couldn't stop pressing that spot behind my knee. There was something about it, not the pain itself, but the way it felt like it didn't belong to me, like it had been borrowed from someone else's body. The days passed, then weeks, then months. The ache grew from an occasional throb to a steady pressure, not sharp, not unbearable, just present. I mentioned it once to my doctor during a checkup. He poked a little, asked if it hurt to walk. I said sometimes, and he nodded. Probably arthritis, he mumbled. Common at your age. I nodded too. It's funny how easily we accept vague answers when they fit the story we're already telling ourselves. But something inside me, something old and quiet, kept tugging. A whisper I didn't know how to translate. I started noticing small things. I'd limp slightly when getting out of bed. I hesitated before going downstairs. My walks to the mailbox grew shorter. But I didn't talk about it, because to speak it out loud would make it real. And once something is real, you can't unknow it. One evening, I stood up too quickly, and my leg buckled beneath me. I caught myself on the table, but the look on my daughter's face, that mix of fear and forced calm, shook something loose inside me. Still, I smiled. Just a little slip, I said. I'm fine. We both knew I wasn't. I started wearing longer dresses so no one could see the swelling. I skipped Sunday service more often. I blamed the weather. I blamed the news. I blamed anything except what I should have, the growing signal inside my own body. We're taught to endure, especially women, especially mothers, especially grandmothers. We carry pain like groceries, quietly, efficiently, without drawing attention. Looking back now, I see that was the beginning. Not the diagnosis, not the test results, not even the fall that would come months later. No, it started the moment I chose silence over curiosity. When I chose denial over awareness. The pain was never the enemy. My refusal to see it was. And now, I live with the knowledge that what could have been caught early was left to bloom in the dark. I wish someone had told me then what I now whisper to you. Every small ache is a language, and our bodies, these tired, beautiful, stubborn bodies, are always speaking, But too often we're too afraid, or too proud, or too busy surviving to listen. The night I couldn't stand without crying wasn't loud. There was no dramatic fall, no sirens, no one rushing in to help. It was just me, alone in my bedroom, standing barefoot on the cold floor, gripping the edge of my dresser like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to the earth. The pain had moved, no longer a dull ache, but a sharp, burning thread that ran from my calf to my thigh, pulsing with every heartbeat like it had something urgent to say. I tried to shift my weight to the other leg, but even that felt like betrayal, as if I were abandoning a part of myself that was begging not to be ignored anymore. I remember trying to sit back down, but my body didn't move with the trust it once had. My knees hesitated, trembling as though unsure if they could hold me again. I gritted my teeth, not because of pride, but fear. Fear that if I let the tears come, I wouldn't be able to stop them. That if I admitted something was really wrong, I would cross a line I couldn't return from. The room was dark, except for the soft yellow glow of the lamp I keep on the nightstand. I caught my reflection in the mirror. My face looked older somehow. Not just tired, but worn, like a page that's been turned too many times. And then it happened. A single tear fell, not from the pain, but from the quiet, terrifying realization that this was no longer something I could fix with rest or warm compresses. This was something else, something bigger. I tried to call my daughter, but I stopped halfway through dialing. What would I say? "Hi, I'm scared of my own leg." She'd worry. She'd drive over. She'd look at me with that face she makes when she's trying not to cry. I couldn't bear that. So I told myself I'd wait until morning, that things always feel worse at night, that I was overreacting. But when morning came, the pain was worse. I used the wall to get to the bathroom. I didn't tell anyone. I canceled lunch plans. I told people I had a headache. I moved less, sat more. And every time I did, the pain grew bolder, like it knew I had given up the fight, like it sensed I wouldn't push back anymore. That night was the moment everything shifted. Not because I couldn't walk, but because I finally felt how fragile I'd become. My independence, once as solid as the ground I stood on, now felt like a thread unraveling beneath me. It was the first time I truly feared being alone, not for emotional reasons, but physical ones. What if I fell and no one knew? What if I couldn't get up next time? People think aging happens gradually, and in many ways it does. But there are moments, sharp and unmistakable, that divide your life into a before and an after. That night was mine. I just didn't know how long the after would be or what it would take from me in the end. When I finally made it to the clinic, I didn't even sit in the waiting room. I stood, leaning against the wall like some stubborn statue, trying to hide the tremble in my legs. The nurse called my name, and I smiled, that polite, tight-lipped smile women my age wear when we're falling apart inside. I didn't want to look like I was in pain, even though every step felt like dragging a rusted chain behind me. It's strange, isn't it? How we can be drowning but still worry about seeming put together. The doctor was kind enough. Young. Too young to understand what it means to feel your body betraying you in slow motion. He asked a few questions, checked my blood pressure, then tapped my knee lightly and asked if I felt anything. I said yes, though I wasn't sure what exactly I felt anymore. It was a blur. Numbness and fire, sometimes at the same time. He asked how long I'd had the pain. I told him it started months ago, soft and quiet, like a whisper. He nodded, typed something into his computer and said, "Probably just inflammation, maybe arthritis. We'll keep an eye on it." Keep an eye on it. That phrase followed me home like a shadow. I wanted to believe him. I wanted it to be something small, something manageable. But something inside me, that old inner voice I should have trusted more, told me this wasn't arthritis. This was something deeper, more dangerous. But I didn't push. I didn't insist. I didn't ask for scans or second opinions. Because I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to be that patient. So I nodded, took the prescription, and went home with a bottle of pills and a growing sense of dread. That night, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the label. Take twice daily for pain. No mention of what was causing the pain. No mention of what I should be watching for. Just 2 pills a day and the silent hope that everything would somehow fix itself. I took one and waited for relief. It came, briefly. The ache dulled enough to let me sleep. But when I woke, the pain was there, patient and permanent, like it had just been resting too. I think what hurts most isn't that the doctor missed something. It's that I missed something. Or rather, that I saw it and still said nothing. That I had a chance to speak up, to ask for more, and I chose silence instead. Because we're taught to be polite, to trust authority, to minimize ourselves so others won't feel inconvenienced. But pain doesn't care about manners. And sometimes being polite costs more than we can afford. Looking back now, that visit wasn't just a misdiagnosis. It was the moment I gave away my own voice. The moment I allowed someone else's certainty to outweigh my own knowing. And that, I think, is when things truly began to slip beyond my control. Pain is a strange thing. It doesn't always arrive like thunder. Sometimes it moves in like fog, slow, quiet, unassuming, until one day you realize you can't see clearly anymore. That's how it was for me. The ache in my leg became part of the background, not sharp, not screaming, just constant. I stopped measuring days by the calendar and started measuring them by the level of pain I woke up with. Mild throb, deep pull, sudden sting. Each one was a language I didn't yet understand, but I learned to respond with silence, with stillness, with survival. I adapted. That's what we do when we're afraid. I started walking differently, a slight shift in weight to avoid the sharpest twinge. I took longer to get out of chairs. I planned my day around the shortest routes between rooms, and I stopped making plans that required more than one flight of stairs. I didn't realize how much my world had shrunk until I noticed I hadn't been to the garden in weeks. It used to be my sanctuary, the soil, the smell, the peace. But now it felt too far, too risky, too painful. The worst part wasn't the pain itself. It was the isolation it brought with it. Pain makes you quiet, not just in voice, but in spirit. You stop mentioning it because you don't want to sound dramatic. You smile when people visit, even though sitting for long stretches makes your leg burn. You nod along when someone says, "You look great," while your body is screaming beneath the surface. And you tell yourself, this is just part of getting old. But I knew it wasn't. This pain had a weight to it, a presence. It wasn't just discomfort. It was something that had claimed a piece of me, something I was carrying every minute, every breath. I began to dream about it even. Not in nightmares, but in soft, strange images, like walking through water or dragging something invisible behind me. It followed me everywhere, and yet I had told almost no one. And so it became my companion, my silent witness. I gave it space in my routines, in my choices, in my sleep. I began to dress differently, choosing comfort over vanity. I stayed home more, sat more, moved less. And with each passing day, I felt myself shrinking, not in size, but in presence, like I was slowly disappearing from my own life. We don't talk enough about the grief of living in a body that no longer feels like your own. People assume grief is for death. But there is grief in losing parts of yourself while you're still here. And I grieved silently for the woman who used to move freely, who didn't think twice before standing or bending or reaching for something on a shelf. She was still inside me, but further away now, harder to reach. The pain didn't scream, it whispered, and I learned to whisper back. But deep inside, I knew something was growing in that silence, something that wouldn't stay quiet forever. It started with little lies. I'm just tired today. The weather's been messing with my joints. I've been sitting too long, that's all. Each excuse came easier than the last, not because I wanted to hide, but because I didn't want them to worry. My daughter already had enough on her plate. 2 jobs, a teenage son, a marriage she was trying to hold together. And my granddaughter? She was just starting college. I didn't want to be the reason she stayed home one weekend instead of going out to dance under the stars. So I kept it to myself. I smiled through dinners, bit my tongue through Sunday visits, and adjusted my chair when they weren't looking to ease the pressure on my leg. I became an actress in my own life, carefully performing health and energy when neither were fully present. And oddly, no one asked too much. People want to believe you're okay. It's easier for everyone. But I knew what I was doing. I was building a wall of silence, brick by brick, excuse by excuse, and the higher it got, the more alone I felt. It's a strange thing, hiding pain to protect the ones you love, only to find that in doing so, you cut yourself off from their comfort. I missed the way my granddaughter used to sprawl across my bed and talk for hours. I missed how my daughter would braid my hair while we watched old movies. But I pulled away, little by little, afraid that if they looked too closely, they'd see the truth. That something inside me was changing. One evening, my daughter dropped by unannounced. I had been lying on the couch, leg elevated, a heating pad buzzing beneath my knee. When she knocked, I scrambled to hide the pad, to stand and smooth my dress. But I moved too fast, and pain shot up my thigh like lightning. I must have gasped, because when she came in, her eyes narrowed. "You okay, Mom?" she asked. "Of course," I smiled. "Just stood up too fast." That night, she lingered longer than usual, watched me more closely. I could feel the weight of her gaze, not judging, but searching. She didn't push, and I didn't offer. I was scared that saying it out loud would make it too real. And then what? Doctors, hospitals, tests, being a patient, being someone they had to take care of. I couldn't bear the thought of that. I wanted to be the strong one, the anchor, the steady voice in their storms. So I hid it, day after day, until it became a habit, a second skin. But secrets have weight, and mine was growing heavier, dragging behind me with every limping step, every forced smile, every word I didn't say. It's a lonely thing, carrying something no one else can see. And the truth is, I wasn't protecting them. I was protecting myself from the fear of what might come next. There came a morning when I reached for my cane and realized I had forgotten where I placed it. That wasn't like me. I always kept it by the door, leaned carefully against the wall like a trusted friend, waiting for our next slow walk together. But that day, it was missing. And so was a part of me, the part that believed I could still manage this pain alone. I found the cane under the kitchen table, where it must have slipped the night before. As I bent to pick it up, my leg gave a sharp, angry protest. Not just pain, a warning. A flash of something I couldn't ignore anymore. I clutched the table and waited for the burning to pass. My breath came in short, shallow waves. That was when I realized something terrifying. I could no longer walk without holding on to something or someone. Losing independence doesn't come with a ceremony. It doesn't announce itself with drums or sudden collapse. It sneaks up on you in moments just like that, when you reach for something and it isn't there, and your body reminds you that it can no longer guarantee the next step. It's the kind of loss that wraps itself around dignity and tightens quietly. I remember standing in the hallway, staring at the front door. Just days ago, I had walked out with confidence, even if slower than I liked. But that day, the distance to the porch felt vast, impossible. I turned back. The mailbox could wait. The world could wait. From then on, my days began to change shape. I stopped walking around the house without support. I mapped out my routes like a cartographer of limitation. From bedroom to bathroom, kitchen to chair, I learned which furniture could bear my weight, which walls were safest to lean against, and every adjustment, every compromise carved out a little more of my freedom. But the real loss was deeper. It wasn't just about movement, it was about identity. I wasn't just Ruth, the mother, the baker, the knitter, the storyteller. I was becoming Ruth, the fragile one, the one who must be careful, the one who sits more than she stands, the one who used to. I didn't say this out loud, of course, not even to myself. I dressed each morning, applied a bit of lipstick, and kept my chin high. But inside, I knew my world was getting smaller. Not because I wanted less, but because my body was offering less. And I, in return, was learning how to accept it, quietly, solemnly, like folding away a piece of a life I could no longer live. There's a kind of mourning that comes with losing your strength. You don't cry, you don't scream, you just notice, and then you adapt, you adjust, you let go, not all at once, but piece by piece. Until one day you realize the woman you used to be now only exists in memory, and the one you've become. She moves slower, leans harder, but still breathes, still hopes, still wakes up every morning trying. The day I finally let someone help me was the day I realized how far I had drifted from the woman I used to be. My granddaughter Lily showed up with groceries, unannounced, as always. She knew. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she gently placed the bags on the counter without asking if I needed anything. She didn't push, didn't pry, just moved around the kitchen like it was still hers, like she was still the little girl stealing cookies from my jar. But now she moved with intention, watching me carefully, filling the silence with soft questions. "Want me to stay for lunch?" I nodded, too tired to pretend I didn't. And that's when it happened. I reached for a can on the top shelf, and my leg buckled slightly. I caught myself, but not fast enough. Lily turned, stepped forward, her hand on my arm before I could find the words to explain. We froze there for a moment, both of us pretending this was normal. "I'll get it," she said quietly, reaching up and handing me the can. No pity, just presence. That moment broke something inside me, or maybe it softened something I had kept hardened for too long. I sat down slowly, not from pain this time, but from surrender. Not weakness, but a kind of bravery I hadn't known I still had, the courage to accept help. You see, I was raised to be strong, not just physically, but emotionally. We didn't ask for much, and we certainly didn't lean on others. We cooked, cleaned, endured. We made do. But age has a way of humbling even the most stubborn of hearts. There comes a point when strength is no longer about how much you can carry, but about how willing you are to share the weight. That lunch was simple. Soup, bread, quiet conversation. But to me, it felt like a turning point. I watched Lily butter the toast, pour the water, tuck a blanket over my lap without a word, and I realized love shows up in the smallest things. Not in grand gestures, but in presence, in being seen, in being allowed to need someone and not feel ashamed of it. For the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. Not because the pain had lessened, it hadn't, but because I wasn't carrying it alone. And that made all the difference. Letting someone in isn't a sign of failure. It's an act of faith. Faith that we are still worthy of care. Faith that the people we love won't see us as a burden, but as a story worth staying close to. That day, I let Lily carry a piece of my story. Just a little. Just enough. And in return, I found a little more room to breathe. Sometimes healing isn't about removing the pain. It's about knowing you don't have to face it by yourself anymore. After that afternoon with Lily, the silence in my home felt different. Not emptier, but more visible. I noticed things I hadn't before. The way the clock in the hallway ticked louder at night, how the floorboards sighed under my steps, how the shadows from the curtains moved like memories on the wall. It wasn't loneliness I felt, it was awareness. A soft, aching awareness that I was living in the after now, after strength, after certainty, after pretending everything was fine. I began to see my days in smaller pieces. The morning light on the kitchen tiles, the way the kettle steamed like a ritual, the exact number of steps from my bed to the bathroom. Everything was measured, counted, felt. And though my body moved slower, my mind was busier than ever, remembering, rethinking, reevaluating moments that had long since passed. That's when I started talking to myself more. Not out loud, not really, but in the quiet of my thoughts. I'd find myself whispering things I never said when I was younger. I miss you. I should have said sorry. Why did I wait so long to enjoy the little things? It was like the version of me from years ago was finally catching up, knocking gently at the doors I had kept shut. One morning, I sat by the window and watched a child ride past on a bicycle, her laughter trailing behind her like wind chimes. And I thought of the last time I rode a bike. I must have been 30. I had taken Lily's mother for ice cream and raced her down the hill, both of us screaming like fools. I hadn't thought of that day in years. And now, it filled me so suddenly, so completely, I had to close my eyes. That's the strange gift of slowing down. The past returns. Not as regret, but as a chorus of echoes, moments you didn't know you still carried. You remember things that never made it into photo albums. The smell of rain on old coats, the sound of your husband's laugh before the world made him quieter, the touch of your mother's hand when you had a fever. The body may fail, but the soul remembers everything. And in remembering, I began to understand something I had ignored for too long, that my life was not made of the big events, not weddings or births or funerals, but of all the soft, overlooked seconds in between, the smiles that went unnoticed, the quiet kindnesses, the times I showed up for someone even if they never said thank you. That was my life. That was my meaning. I used to fear the stillness. Now I know it's where the truth lives, and even though my leg ached and my body continued to whisper warnings I couldn't ignore, I found a strange comfort in knowing that nothing I had lived was truly gone. It was all still here, in me, with me, becoming me. Even now, in this quiet chapter near the end. I remember the night the pain finally woke me from sleep. Not the dull ache I had grown used to, but something sharp, something new. It radiated from my calf up to my thigh, like my body was trying to scream in a language I had been ignoring. I sat up, gasping, clutching the side of the bed as the room spun. For a moment, I was sure I would faint. Not from fear, I was long past fear, but from the sheer weight of what I now knew deep down. This was no longer something I could manage with warm compresses and quiet prayers. I didn't wake anyone. I waited. I watched the light creep in through the curtains. I counted the hours until the clinic opened. I dressed slowly, slipped on my shoes like armor, and told myself to be brave, not for the doctors, not for the diagnosis, but for myself. Because something had shifted. This pain wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a call. At the hospital, I sat under cold lights while they examined me, scanned me, measured things inside me I couldn't see. Their words were careful, too careful. I've lived long enough to recognize the shape of bad news in the silence between words. When the doctor finally sat across from me and said the phrase, vascular compromise, I didn't flinch. When he mentioned a possible clot, reduced circulation, a risk of something more serious if left untreated, I didn't cry. I just nodded. Because somewhere deep inside, I already knew. I had known for weeks, maybe months. My leg wasn't just aching, it was warning me, and I hadn't listened. As I left the hospital with a folder of appointments and a referral for a specialist, I thought about how strange it is that we often know when something is wrong. We feel it. Our bodies whisper, then speak, then shout. But still, we wait. We wait for confirmation, for permission, for a reason to finally take our pain seriously. And I wondered, how many others are doing the same right now? Sitting at their tables with heating pads and excuses, choosing silence over inconvenience, hoping their bodies will heal without attention, without confrontation. If I could speak to that woman, the one I was a few months ago, I'd hold her hands and say, "Don't wait for the scream. Listen to the whisper." I'd tell her that dignity isn't lost in asking for help. It's found in trusting your own instincts, and that no one earns more time by pretending everything is fine. That night, I lay in bed with my leg propped high, my thoughts quiet, my heart heavy, not with regret, but with clarity. The pain had finally forced me to see myself fully, not as a burden, not as someone fading, but as someone still here, still learning, still with something to teach, even if what I had to offer came wrapped in the ache I had once tried to ignore. After the hospital visit, something inside me shifted, not just in my body, but in the way I saw myself. I had always taken pride in being strong, in enduring, in pushing through. That's how I was raised. You didn't complain. You kept moving. You didn't make a fuss. But now, the truth sat with me like an old friend. My strength wasn't what it used to be, and pretending otherwise wasn't bravery. It was denial. I began to notice the small betrayals of my body more clearly, the way my hand trembled when I poured tea, how the steps to the porch seemed to grow steeper, how even folding laundry left my legs trembling. And more than anything, I felt a deep exhaustion that no sleep could touch. Not the kind that comes from doing too much, but the kind that comes from holding too much in. But instead of despair, something gentler began to take root. Acceptance. I stopped fighting the truth of my condition and started preparing for it, honoring it, learning from it. I reorganized my space, brought the most used things within reach, cleared out the rugs I could trip on, installed a handrail in the shower. I no longer saw these adjustments as signs of weakness, but as proof of love. Love for myself, for the time I still had left, for the people who might one day care for me. I also began writing more. Pages and pages. Letters to my daughter, to Lily, to friends long gone, to versions of myself I had forgotten. I poured into those pages what I never said out loud. The memories I cherished, the mistakes I made, the joys I never expected, the sorrows I carried quietly. And most of all, I wrote about the moment it began. When the pain in my leg first appeared, how I ignored it, how it grew, how it led me here. It felt important to document not just the story, but the lesson. Because pain, when faced with honesty, becomes more than suffering. It becomes a teacher. And I had learned something essential, that we often wait too long to care for ourselves. That by the time we admit we're not okay, we've already lost precious moments we can never reclaim. I shared one of my letters with Lily. She cried while reading it. Not because it was sad, but because it was true. She said it felt like hearing my voice even before I was gone. That meant everything to me. I want others to have that too. A piece of truth they can hold. A reminder to listen, to the body, to the soul, to the signs that whisper before they scream. That's why I'm telling this story. Not for sympathy, but so someone else, somewhere, might recognize their own warning sign and choose differently. As the days passed, I began to sit by the window more often, not just to watch the neighborhood, but to feel time. It's a strange sensation, feeling time not as hours or minutes, but as weight, as a presence. The way the afternoon light changes the color of the curtains, the way the wind taps the window like an old friend checking in, The way you begin to realize this life has more behind it than ahead. I didn't feel scared. That surprised me. I thought aging would come with dread, with panic, with the desperate clinging to what used to be. But instead, I felt softness, a kind of gentle release. Not because I wanted to go, but because I finally understood what it meant to have lived. I thought about the early days of the pain in my leg, how it whispered and I silenced it, how my silence delayed care, and how that delay may have opened a door I now couldn't close. But I also thought about everything that door let in: clarity, reflection, and an honesty I had never given myself before. We are taught to measure life in milestones, weddings, births, careers. But what I've learned is that life is mostly made of middle moments, unremarkable days that leave the deepest marks. A quiet cup of tea, a hand held during a hard conversation, the sound of someone laughing in the next room. Those are the real treasures. And so many of mine came rushing back to me as I sat in that chair by the window, leg wrapped in warmth, heart stretched wide with memory. Sometimes Lily would sit with me, and we'd just be quiet. She didn't need me to tell stories anymore. She just wanted to be near. That nearness, that shared silence, was a kind of healing neither of us had words for. And one evening, as the sun painted the walls golden and the ache in my leg pulsed like a soft drum beat, I whispered something I hadn't said aloud yet. "I'm almost done here." Lily didn't flinch. She took my hand and said, "Then I'll stay until you're ready." There was no drama, no tears, just presence. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not because the pain was gone or the end had become easier, but because I was no longer holding it alone. Because someone knew, someone saw, and that made all the difference. I used to think the end would come with noise, machines, hospital beds, chaos. But maybe, just maybe, it comes like this, with quiet knowing, soft sunlight, and the hand of someone you love resting gently in your own. In the quiet of early morning, just before the sun had fully broken through the clouds, I sat in my favorite chair and took one long, deliberate breath, not because the air was fresher or the pain was gone, but because I had finally made peace with something I had resisted for too long, the truth that my time here is almost over. It didn't come to me with sadness. It came like a whisper, a gentle, persistent knowing that had been sitting in my chest for weeks, maybe months. And I realized that holding on to fear of the end was far heavier than simply accepting it. I was tired, not just physically, but deep in my spirit, from trying to outrun the clock. So I did something I hadn't done before. I began speaking out loud to the ones who aren't here anymore. My mother, my husband, friends I lost along the way. I told them I was coming soon, that I remembered everything, that I forgave what needed forgiving and asked for forgiveness in return. The room didn't answer back, but something in me softened, like a thread that had been pulled tight for years was finally let go. I want to say this clearly, while I still can. The pain in my leg was never just about my leg. It was the signal flare, the warning, the small unraveling that revealed a larger truth, that nothing in the body happens in isolation, that pain is never just physical, it is emotional, spiritual. It is a story trying to be heard, and I didn't listen soon enough. But maybe you still can. Don't wait. Don't brush it off. Don't tell yourself it's nothing, because sometimes that nothing is the start of everything. My story isn't one of tragedy. It's a reflection. A lesson passed quietly from one heart to another. If you hear anything in my words, let it be this. Take care of your body, not out of fear, but out of love. It has carried you this far. Honor it before it begins to whisper. I've made peace with what's to come. Not because I'm brave, but because I'm grateful. For the memories, the people, the mornings like this one. For Lily's laughter, for the scent of coffee drifting through an old kitchen, for the thousands of ordinary days that made up an extraordinary life. So this is my goodbye. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon, and that's okay. I'll leave behind my words, my love, and this small warning wrapped in tenderness. Listen early, love fiercely, and never be too proud to ask for help. This chair, this view, this morning, it all feels like a final page. And I'm ready to close the book, not in fear, but in peace. Thank you for reading it with me. If this story echoed something inside you, maybe it's because some truths are meant to be shared, especially when they come from those who've already walked the hardest parts of the road. If my words brought you pause, comfort, or reflection, I invite you to stay close. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like, not just for me, but for every voice that still deserves to be heard before it fades into silence.